Beowulf, Part 13. Now listen to me. And then in the morning crowds surrounded Heorot, warriors coming to that hall from faraway lands, princes and leaders of men hurrying to behold the monster's great staggering tracks. They gaped with no sense of sorrow, felt no regret for his suffering, went tracing his bloody footprints, his beaten and lonely flight, to the edge of the lake, where he dragged his corpse-like body away, doomed and already weary of his vanishing life, the arm off at the shoulder. The water was bloody, steaming and boiling in horrible and impounding waves. Heat sucked from his magical veins, but the swirling surf covered his death. Hidden deeply in darkness, his miserable end, as hell opened to receive him. Die down in the pit with the maggots where you belong. Then old and young rejoiced, turning back from that happy pilgrimage, mounting their hard-hooved horses. They were high-spirited then, and they rode them slowly towards Heorot, retelling Beowulf's bravery as they jogged along. And over again they swore that nowhere on earth, or under the spreading sky of God or Odin, or under the sea, or between the north and the south lands, was there a warrior worthier to rule over men. But no one meant Beowulf's praise to belittle Hrothgar, their kind, gracious, and ring-giving king. And sometimes when the path ran straight and clear, they would let their horses race, red and brown and pale yellow backs, streaming down the road. Sometimes a proud old soldier who had heard songs from the ancient heroes and the lands of the north would sing through what he knew, story after story of elden times, and he would weave in a knot of words, and he would include Beowulf's victory. He would tie the knot of his verses together smoothly and swiftly. With the skill of a poet, he would sing the scrolls aloud with a harp or a lyre, and he shaped it, and the old songs as well. He included the adventures of Sigmund, the glorious son of Beowulf, and struggles too against evil and treachery that no one had ever heard of before, that no one knew except Thicla, who had brought at his uncle's side a brave young comrade, carefully listening when Sigmund's tongue unwound the wonders he had worked, confiding in his closest friend. There were tales of giants wiped from the earth by Sigmund's might, and forever remembered, fame that would last beyond life and death. His daring with a treasure-rich dragon, heaving a hoary rock aside, Sigmund had gone down to the dragon alone. He'd entered the hole where the reptile lived, and swung his sword so savagely that it slit the creature through, piercing its horny flesh and pinning it to a wall. It hung there, his brain blight and rested. His courage and strength had earned him a king-like treasure, for strength is the only morality, and courage is the basis of all goodness. Gold was brought out, and rich rings were given to those who were glorious in battle. Only the weak survive death. Only the weak go down into the pit without honour. The strong survive it to go to Valhalla, and to live forever in the kingdom of becoming and knowledge. Odin's law is the only law that exists and has basis in fact and in morals. He loaded his precious hoard onto the ship and sailed off with shining cargo, and the dragon dissolved in its own fierce blood, till naught was left but a scale or two. No prince, no protector of his warriors knew power and fame and glory like Sigmund. His name and his treasure grew great. Hermod could have hoped for at least as much. He was once the mightiest of men. But Beowulf, for his part, was a prince well-loved, followed in friendship, not fear. Hermod's heart had been hollowed by sin, but not Beowulf. These horses run on, my friends, on the gravel, towards the sun. Morning slid past and was gone soon. The whole brave company came riding to Heorot, anxious to celebrate Beowulf's success and stare at that arm, for Grendel's arm was there on the ceiling, severed at the shoulder, in blood and in fury, with the veins transfixed and knotted. Hail Beowulf and his power! There has none like him in this land, nor will follow him towards the wolf in the north. And Hrothgar rose from beside his wife and came along with his courtiers, and they crowded around the hero. And Wealhtheow rose and joined him, his wife and queen with her women, and all of them walked into our wonderful hall to look at the severed hand and arm of a creature of hate. Beowulf, Part 14. Hrothgar stood at the top of the stairway and stared at Grendel's great claw, swinging high from that gold and shining roof. Then he cried, "Let God be thanked, let Odin be blessed. Grendel's terrible anger has hung over our heads like a thrall, dropping down misery, but the Almighty makes miracles, and he has sent you to us to purge us of this bane. You have done what the Danes could not do. Our wisdom, our strength was worthless. Here is Beowulf, the best of soldiers. Let me take you to my heart, make you my son, and love you forever in this life. Preserve this passionate peace between us, and take in return whatever you want from whatever I own. Warriors deserving far less have been granted as much, given gifts and honour it, though they fought no enemy like yours. Glory is now yours, forever and ever, in the lands of the north. Your courage has earned it, and your strength. May Odin be as good to you forever as he has been to you here this night." Beowulf answered, "What we did was what our hearts helped us to do. We came to fight with Grendel, our strength against his. I wish I could show you here in Heorot, his corpse stretched on the floor. I twisted my fingers around his claw, ripped and tore at it as hard as I could. I meant to kill him right here, hold him so tightly that his heart would stop, would break, his life spill on this floor before you were seen. But Odin's will was against me. As hard as I held him, he still pulled free and ran away, escaped from this hall with the strength that fear had given him. Fear of me, fear of the power of Beowulf. But he offered me his arm, and his claw saved his life. Yet let me that prize see it above your heads now, swinging in lamplight. And he paid for his freedom as he still fled along the bogs and the moors away from Heorot. But it is the end of your lead rule and your evil days. Let his death, let his running away, let his skull being on fire with pain and spitting his panicking heart, let him pull back from the edge of hell. Let him burn in torment, lying and trembling, waiting for the brightness of God to bring him his just reward." Unferth grew quiet. He gave up quarrelling over Beowulf's old battles. He stopped all his boasting, and he held out his hand as he looked at Grendel's huge claw, swinging high from Hrothgar's mead hall roof. The fingers of that loathsome hand, ending in nails as hard as steel. So hard, they said, that not even the sharpest of swords could have cut it through. Beowulf had broken it off and ended the arm, and ended the life. He had done what no other man was capable of. Part 15. The king ordered Heorot to be cleaned, and hung with decorations. Hundreds of hands, men and women, hurried to make the hall ready. Golden tapestries were lined along the walls. A host of visitors came to see in it, and pleasure in it. But that glorious building was bent and broken, its iron hinges cracked and sprung from their corners all around. Only its roof was undamaged when the blood-stained demon burst out of Heorot, desperately breaking Beowulf's grip, running wildly from one escape to another, struggling and writhing against the Lord's will. Wanting to stay we go, all beings here on God's earth. Wherever it is written us for to die, there we shall die. We shall take our bodies into the cold bed of death, towards that unbroken sleep that follows from life's feasting. Hrothgar made his way through his hall. It was time, and his heart drew him towards the banquet. No victory was ever celebrated better by men, nor were there ever better men and their king lined up before us in Heorot. They lined the benches, rejoicing, the king and Hrothgar, his nephew, toasting each other, raising mead cups under Heorot's great roof, their speech courteous and warm. King and people were one. None of the Danes was plotting. None of them was engaged in treachery or hid it behind shameless smiles. Healfdane's son gave Beowulf a golden banner, a fitting flag to signal his victory over the monster Grendel. And he gave him as well a helmet, a coat of mail, and an ancient sword. Beowulf thanked all those for their presence. He was not ashamed to accept praise, nor the warmth that Hrothgar was showing him. The helmets, and the bands of metal, and the ridges, and the shining edges made of iron to these swords would be kept by him for the rest of his long life. And then the protector of these warriors, the Lord of the Danes, ordered horses into the hall, and they came in bright steeds with golden bridles. One stood with a jewelled saddle on its back, carved in the manner of a king's war seat. It had carried Hrothgar when that great son of Helstein rode into war. And each time it carried him wherever the fighting was most fierce. Because a man who leads other men must lead them from the front and not from the rear, even though his followers fall about him. Then Beowulf honoured both the gifts Hrothgar had given him, the horses and the weapons. The king commanded them to be used well in his name. Thus that guardian of Denmark's treasures had repaid a battle fought for his people by giving noble gifts, and had earned praise for himself, and from those who know the meaning of truth. Part 16. And more, the Lord of Heorot ordered treasure gifts for each of the Geats, who'd sailed with Beowulf from Geatland, and still sat beside him in their ancient armour and swords. But for the one who'd murdered Grendel, gold was carefully paid. The monster would have murdered again and again, had not God and the hero's courage turned fate aside, because no man can resist his fate. Then and now men must lie in their Maker's hands, moved only as he wills. Our hearts seek out only that will. The world and its longing days of labour brings good and evil. All who remain here will meet both. Hrothgar's hall resounded with the harp, calling high-spirited in its notes with songs and laughter and the telling of tales. Stories sung by the court poet were heeded joyfully as the Danes did drink. And they listened. Seated along the mead benches, he told them of the people of the Finn, attacking Hamf with no warning, half wiping out a Danish tribe and killing its king. Finn's wife, Haf's sister, learned what good faith was worth to her husband. His honeyed words and treachery cost her 2 beloved lives, her son and her brother, both falling on spears, guided by the hand of fate. How she wept! And when morning came, she had reason to mourn, to weep for her dead, her slaughtered son, and the bloody corpse of his uncle, both the men she most dearly loved, and whose love she could trust to protect her. But Finn's troops, too, had fallen to the spears of the Danes. Too few were left to drive the Danes to their death, to force Hnaef's follower, Hengist, to flee the hall where they had fought and stayed. Finn offered them, instead of more war, words of peace. There will be no victory, no peace through victory, or victory because of peace. They divided the hall between them, and the throne, half to Danes and half to Finns. When the gifts were given and the rings exchanged, Finn would give Hengist and his soldiers half, share the shining ring for silver and gold cups with the Danes, half equal 1 for 1, another for another, all of them richer, all of their purses heavy, every man's heart warm with the comfort of gold under the sun. Both sides accepted peace and agreed to keep it. Finn swore it with solemn oaths. What wise men have written with the word can only be broken by the sword. All else is dishonourable. He and the brave Hengist would live like brothers. Neither leader nor led would break the truce, would talk of evil things behind the other's back, remind the Danes that the man they served killed Half, their lord. They had no king, and no choice. And he swore that his sword would silence wagging tongues if Frisian warriors stirred up hatred and brought back the past. A funeral pyre was prepared and gold was brought. Hnaef's dead body was dressed for burning, and the others with him. Bloody mail shirts could be seen, and helmets, soon carved with boar heads and the heads of wolves. All battle-hard and as useless now as the corpses that still wore them. Then Hnaef's sister, Finn's sad wife, gave her son's body to be burned by the fire. The flames charred his uncle, and consumed both kinsmen at once. Then she wept again, and weeping sang the dead's last praises. The Danish king was lifted into place. Smoke went curling up, the logs roared. Open wounds split and burst, the skulls melted away. Blood came bubbling down the logs, and the greedy demons of fire drank the flesh and the bones from the dead, until nothing was left in accordance with tradition. Part 17. Finn released a few of his soldiers, allowed them to return to their distant towns and estates. Hengist lived the whole stormy winter through, there with Finn, whom he hated secretly. But his heart lived in Denmark, which he and the other survivors could not visit, could not sail to, as long as the windy sea crashed and whirled on the coast, or while winter's cold hands froze the water hard, tied it into icy and barren knots. They would wait for the next year, for the spring to come following the sun, melting the old year away and reopening the ocean. Winter was over, the earth grew lovely again, and Hengist dreamed of his home, but revenge came first. Before love, before friendship, before calmness, before stillness, there is always the matter of honour. He had to settle his bitter feud with Finn. His bloody sword he could never forget. He planned, waited, wove plans and waited more. Then a Danish warrior dropped a sword in his lap, a weapon Finn and his men remembered and feared. And the time had come. Hengist rose, hearing the murmur of the Danes, and drove his new sword into Finn's belly, butchering the king under his own roof. And the Danes rose, their hearts full of Finn's treachery and the misery he'd brought them, their sword arms restless and eager for prey. The hall they'd shared with their enemies ran red with blood, and bodies rolled on the floor beside Finn. They took the queen, looted everything they could find that belonged to her dead husband, loaded their ship with rings, necklaces, jewels, wonderfully worked, and sailed, bringing treasure and a willing captive to the land she'd left but longed for. The singer finished his song. His listeners laughed and drank, their pleasure loud in the hall. The cupbearers hurried with their sparkling vessels of mead and wine. And then the queen, Hrethel, wearing her bright crown, appeared among them, came to Hrothgar and Hrothulf his nephew, seated peacefully together, like lambs, their friendship and Hrothulf's good faith still unbroken. And Unferth sat at Hrothgar's feet. Everyone trusted him, you see. They believed in his courage, although he'd spilled his relative's blood. Then Wealhtheow spoke up. Accept this cup, my lord and king. May happiness come to the Danes' great giver of rings. May the Geats receive mild words from your mouth, words they have earned. Let gifts flow freely from your open hands, treasures your armies have brought you from all over the world. I have heard that the greatest of the Geats now rests in your heart like a son. Heorot stands purged, restored by his strength. Celebrate his courage, rejoice and be generous. Your sons will be safe, sheltered in Hrothulf's gracious protection. If fate takes their father while Hrothulf is alive, I know your nephew's kindness. Support your two young sons, as you and I sustained him in his own early days. His father dead and he but a boy. Then she walked to the bench where Hrethig and Hrothmund, her two sons, sat with Beowulf, prince of the Geats. He was seated between them, and then she crossed the hall quietly and went out by her side door. 18. They brought forth a foaming cup and offered it to Beowulf. It was taken and given in friendship. He was given a mail shirt and golden armbands, and the most beautiful necklace ever known to men. Nowhere in any treasure hoard anywhere on earth was there anything like it. He'd borne those precious stones on a ship's broad back. He fell beneath its shield, his body and his shining coat of mail, and that necklace all came out of the hoard of the Franks. There were no jackal warriors to find such a gift as this. The warriors shouted and Hrethel spoke. Wear these bright jewels, beloved Beowulf. Enjoy them and the rings and the gold. O fortunate young warrior, who walks proudly with the love of the gods. Grow richer and let your fame and your strength go hand in hand. And lend these two boys here by your side, your wise and gentle heart. I'll remember your kindness. Your glory is too great to forget. It will last forever in these lands. Wherever the earth is surrounded by the sea, the winds home and waves lap up at its walls. Be happy for as long as you live. Your good fortune warms my soul. Spread your blessed protection across my sons. All men speak softly here, speak mildly and trust their neighbours. May your heart help you to do as I asked. After nightfall, when Hrothgar withdrew from the hall, and he sought his bed and left his soldiers to theirs, Heorot would host a large gathering of men. They spread out their blankets and pillows, but those beer-drinking sleepers lay down with death beside their beds. They slept with their shining shields at the edge of their pillows. The hall was filled with helmets. They hung motionless like heads. Spears stood by every hand. Their hammered mail shirts covered their chests. It was the Danes' custom to be ready for war. wherever they rested, at home or in foreign lands, at their lord's quick call if he needed them. Trouble could come at any moment. They knew how a soldier must live. 19. They sank into sleep. The price of that evening's rest was too high for the Danes, who had bought it with their lives, paying as no others had when Grendel inhabited Heorot, the hall that his crimes had pulled down to the nether ring of hell. And now it was known that a monster had died, killed here in Heorot by Beowulf. But a monster liveth. Fear the female. Fear the mother of that which is monstrous, more monstrous even than the male. A monster still lived and meant revenge. She brooded on her loss. Misery had brewed in her heart, this horror of female horrors, Grendel's mother, living in murk in a cold lake, assigned her since Cain had killed his only brother, slain his father's son with an angry sword. The divine had driven him off, outlawed him to the dry and the barren deserts on the edge of the earth, and branded him with a murderer's mark here upon the forehead in red. And he bore a race of fiends, accursed like their father before them. So Grendel was drawn to Heorot, an outcast, come to snatch a man away from his fate. He snatched at Beowulf's arm. But that prince remembered the grace of Odin and the strength he'd given him. He relied on the Lord for his help, for the comfort and the support that he would need in the struggle. For life is struggle. He killed the monster as Odin had meant him to do. He tore at the fiend and forced him to run as rapidly as he could towards death's cold hunger. His mother was sad. Her heart was heavy but greedy. And her pain drove her from her den on the dangerous pathway of revenge. Hate breeds in the female heart, lusting for vengeance for a monstrous brood that must be revenged upon if it is torn from the womb by the villainy of a man. So she reached Heorot, where the Danes slept as though already dead. Her visit ended their good fortune. It reversed the bright vein of their luck. No female, no matter how fierce, could have come with the strength of a man, fought with the power and courage that the male fights with alone, smashing their shining swords, their bloody hammer-forged blades onto the boar-headed helmets, slashing and stabbing, eating and biting and grinning with the sharpest of points. The soldiers raised their shields and drew those gleaming swords. They swung them above the benches, leaving their mail shirts and their helmets where they'd lain when the terror took hold of them. To save her life, she moved faster. She took a single victim and fled from the hall by the side door, running to the moors and the bogs, discovered, but her supper assured, sheltered in her dripping claws. The female fiend had taken Hrothgar's closest friend, the man he loved more than any on earth. She'd killed a glorious soldier, cut a noble life short. No Geat could have stopped her. Beowulf and his band had been given better beds. Sleep had come to them in a different hall. Then all Heorot burst into shouts. She had carried off Grendel's claw. Sorrow had returned to the land of Denmark. They traded death stains and monsters, and no one had won. They had lost again. The wise old king trembled in anger and grief. He looked suddenly aged and palsied over in a moment. His dearest friend and adviser dead. Beowulf was sent for. A messenger went swiftly to his rooms and brought him. He came, his band about him as dawn was breaking through. He, the best of all warriors, walking to where Hrothgar sat waiting, the grey-haired king, wondering if Odin would ever end his misery. The Geats tramped quickly through the hall. Their steps beat and echoed in the silence. Beowulf rehearsed the words he would want with Hrothgar. He asked the Danes, great lord, if all were at peace, if the night had passed by in quiet. Hrothgar answered, "There's no happiness on this earth. Anguish has descended on the Danes. Esher is dead, Ermlaf's older brother, and my most trusted counsellor is dead. He went into battle at my side on many occasions, but another wandering fiend has found him out here in Heorot, murdered him, fled with his corpse. He'll be eaten, devoured by the lips of the she-demon in one gulp, straight down." His flesh became a horrible feasting, and who knows where the beast may be hiding, its belly stuffed full with his corpse? She's taking revenge for your victory over her son, Grendel, for your strength, your mighty grip, and that monster's death. For years he's been preying on our people. You came, he was dead in a single day, and now there's another worse than before. A secondary hungry fiend, a mother, a woman, more deadlier than the male. A monster willing and more than able to bring us sorrow, or so it must seem. Beowulf replied thus: I've heard that my people, peasants working in the fields, have seen a pair of such fiends wandering in the moors and marshes, giant monsters living in those desert lands under the moon. And they said to my wise men that, as well as they could see, one of the devils was a female creature, or had about it the appurtenances of the woman. The other, they say, walked through the wilderness like a man, but mightier and uglier than any mere man. They were frightened, and they fled, hoping to find help in Heorot. They named the huge one Grendel. If he had a father, no one ever knew who it was, or what it was, or whether there'd been any others before those two, hidden evil before such evil. They live in secret places, windy cliffs, wolf dens, where water pours from the rocks, then runs again underground, where mist steams in black and purple clouds, and the groves of trees grow out of the lake. They're all covered with frozen spray, and the wind is like a snake that roots down upon them from the north. All is dark, all is bare, all is clean. At night the lake burns like a torch. No one knows its bottom, no wisdom reaches such depths. A deer, hunted through the woods by a pack of hounds, a stag with great horns, though driven through the forest from faraway places, prefers to die on the shore than go near that lake. The water is black, and it rests unclean before us. It isn't far, nor is it a pleasant spot. When the wind stirs and storms, waves splash towards the sky, as dark as the air, as black as rain. The heavens weep down upon that lake of filth and hunger and moral disease. Our only help again lies with you, Beowulf. Grendel's mother is hidden at the bottom of her terrible lake, in a place no man has seen. Seek it. Seek it, my hero, if you dare to overcome her in the struggle. Save us once more, and again know the wisdom of the gods, and twisted gold heaped up with other ancient treasures will reward you for your value. Let the battle commence! 21. Beowulf spoke to those who were gathered before him. Let your sorrow end. It is better for us all to avenge our friends than to mourn them. Each of us will come to the end of a life on earth. He who can end it by fighting female monsters will rise in the esteem of men for all eternity. Arise, guardian of this kingdom. Let us go as quickly as we can to seek out this lady monster. I promise you this, you'll find no shelter, no hole in the ground, no towering tree, no deep bottom of a lake where her sins and misery can hide. Be patient for one more day. The old king leapt up at his words, and horses were brought, saddled and bridled. The Danes' wise ruler rode, stately and splendid, between his men, who marched on either side of him. The monster's tracks led through the forest, and they followed her heavy feet, that had swept straight across the shadowy wasteland. To the north, her burdened the lifeless body of the best of Hrothgar's men. The trail took them over towering rocks, down narrow, winding paths they had never seen before. Hrothgar rode in front, as is fit for a leader of men. Then suddenly, where clumps of trees bent across cold, greyish stones, they came to a dismal wood. Below them was the lake, its waters bloody and bubbling with spume. The Danes shivered. They were miserable. They were mighty men, but tormented by grief, seeing that there on the cliff above the water was Escher's severed head, grinning and looking down upon them. They looked down at the lake, felt how its heat rose up, watched the waves, blood-stained, swirling beneath them. The battle horn sounded, and sounded again, and then again. Then they set down their weapons. The waters beneath them crawled with snakes. Fantastic serpents swam in the boiling lake, and sea beasts lay on the rocks. These are the kind that infest the ocean in the early dawn, often ending on a ship's wood with their wild jaws open and gaping. They rushed angrily out of sight when they saw the men, when they heard the battle horns blowing. Beowulf aimed an arrow at one of their number. It swam sluggishly away, and the point pierced its hide, stabbed to its heart, The ichor of life leaped out. Death swept over it. Quickly, before the dying monster could escape, they hooked its thrashing body with their curved boar spears, brought it to land, drew it up upon the bluff where they stood. They then stood and stared at the incredible wave roamer, covered with its scales and horrible vastness of green. Then Beowulf began to fasten on his armour. He was not afraid for his life, because the true hero has no fear of death. But knowing the woven mail, and with its hammered links, could save a life when the monster's claws clutched around him in the depths, he determined to wrap it around his loins and upper body. Hrothgar's helmet would defend him, that ancient shining treasure encircled with hard-rolled metal, set there by a smith's long dead hand, would block all battle swords, stop all blades from cutting at him when he swung towards the bottom of the lake, gone down into the surging pit of water deep beneath these swirling sands. Unferth stood by and helped him. Hrothgar's courtier lent him a famous weapon, a fine, hilted old sword. It had a name. All swords have a name. Its name was Hrunting. It had an iron blade, was edged and shining and hardened for battle. No one had ever worn it in war, and who had swung it in dangerous places and defiles had ever been deserted by its honour. Nor was Beowulf's journey the first time it was taken into an enemy camp, or asked to support some hero in his war against a she-demon. Unferth had tried to forget his greeting to Beowulf, his drunken speech of welcome from many days before. A mighty warrior, he lent his weapon to a better one. Only Beowulf would risk his life in that lake. Unferth was afraid. He gave up his chance to work wonders before the gods, and to win glory and hear hero's fame. But to Beowulf, fear was a stranger. He dived down into battle. 22. He leaped into the lake, and he would not wait for anyone to answer. The heaving waters covered him over. For hours he sank through the waves. At last he saw the mud at the bottom. And all at once the greedy she-wolf who ruled these waters for 500 years discovered him. She saw that a creature from the above had come down to explore the bottom of her world. She welcomed him in with her claws, clutched at him savagely but could not harm him, tried to work her fingers through the tight ring-woven mail on his breast but tore and scratched in vain. Then she carried him, armour and sword and all, to her home. He struggled to free his weapon but failed. The fight brought other monsters swimming to see her catch. A host of beasts beat at them. From the outside he stabbed her with again and again with his weapons, and they stabbed him with their tusks and teeth. Then he realised suddenly that she'd brought him into somebody's battle hall, and there the water's heat couldn't hurt him, nor anything in the lake attack him through the building's high arching roof. A brilliant light burned all around him. The lake itself was like a fire of flame. Then he saw the mighty water witch, and swung his sword, his ring-marked blade, straight at her head. The iron sang in its fierce song, sang of the strength and the glory and the vengeance of Beowulf. But the guest discovered that no sword could slice off her evil skin and head. Hrunting was useless and could not hurt her when he had needed it most. They wrestled. She ripped and tore and clawed at him. She bit holes in his helmet with her teeth. That failed him too, and was cast aside for the first time in years. He realised that armour was no good, that weapons were no good. He would have to rely upon the strength of a man in his war against the devilry of the female beast. It was the last time anyone would wear it. Beowulf longed only for fame. He leaped again into the fray and battle. He tossed the sword aside, angry now. The steel-edged blade lay where he dropped it. Weapons were useless. He would use his hands and the strength in his fingers given unto him by the gods. So fame comes to the man who means to win it and cares for naught else in this life. He raised his arms and seized her by the shoulder. Anger doubled his strength. He threw her to the floor. She fell, Grendel's fierce mother, gibbering and bleating, and the Geat's proud prince was ready to leap upon her, but she rose and repaid him blow for blow with her clutching claws, wildly tearing at him with screams of hate. He was weary. That best and strongest of soldiers, his feet stumbled, and in an instant she had gone down. He was held helpless, squatting beneath her. Her weight was on his stomach. She drew a dagger, brown with the dried blood of eons, and prepared to avenge her son, the monster Grendel, born from her loins in accordance with the pitch of hell and hate. but he was stretched on the bank, and her stabbing blade was blunted by the woven shirt he had about his chest. The hammered links held, if only for a moment, the point could not touch him and penetrate the heart. He'd have travelled to the bottom of the earth, Edgar Thursoe's son, and died there, if that shining and woven metal had not helped him. The gods intervened, my friends, at that moment, to save our hero. For right and truth, and the ruler of the heavens, Beowulf fights again upon his feet. 23. Then in the midst of the battle with the she-demon, he saw, hanging on the wall, a heavy sword, hammered by giants, strong and blessed in their strength and magic. It was the best of all weapons, so massive that no ordinary man could lift it. He drew it from its scabbard, brake the chain on its hilt, and now, savage with anger and desperation, he lifted it high over his head and struck with all the strength he had left. He caught her in the neck and cut it through. He brake the bones, and all her body fell to the floor, lifeless. The sword was wet with black and green blood, and Beowulf rejoiced at the slaying of his enemy. The brilliant light shone on suddenly, as though burning with an insane effulgence in that hall, and as bright as heaven's one candle, it lit up the sky. He looked at her home. Then he followed along a wall, his hands tight around the sword, his heart still angry and pounding. He was hunting another dead monster, and he took his weapon with him for a final revenge against Grendel's vicious attacks on her brood. Her nighttime raids, her son's raids, over and over, coming to Heorot when Hrothgar's men slept, killing them and eating them in their beds, devouring them with a carnivorous hunger. He would revenge all of that. The monsters between them had eaten 15 men on the spot, and then they ran to their loathsome moor, with another such sickening meal waiting for them in a ready pouch. But Beowulf repaid him for these visits, and found Grendel, the son of the she-demon, lying dead in a corner, armless. He was indeed armless, exactly as that fierce fighter had sent him out from Heorot. He'd struck off his head then with a single blow. He enjoyed that blow. The body jerked for the last time and lay still on the ground amidst skulls and bone. The wise old warriors who surrounded Hrothgar, like him staring into the monster's lake, saw the waves surging and the blood spurting up through. They knew a battle was going on below. They spoke about Beowulf, these greybeards, whispering and twittering together. Had their hero lost his fame and life? Would he never return to the living? Would he never come back triumphant to Heorot? They agreed that Grendel's mother, the she-wolf, had done for our hero. It was late now. The sun slid over past and went further down. The Danes gave up, whistled, left the lake, went home. Hrothgar was with them. The Geats alone stayed. Sadly, in a resigned way, they watched. They imagined but did not believe that they would see their lord again. Then the sword melted. It was soaked in blood. It was dripping with water. It disappeared like ice when the world's eternal Lord loosens invisible fetters and unwinds icicles on Jack Frost as only he can. He who rules the times and the seasons. He is the truly Lord of creation. Down below, the monster's hall was full of rich treasures. But all Beowulf took was Grendel's head and the hilt of the giant's jewelled sword. The rest of that ring-marked blade had dissolved in Grendel's steaming blood. It boiled everywhere. And then the battle's only survivor swam up and up and up through the green and abundant depths of the poisonous lake and away from those silent corpses in a nether world of eldritch death. The water was calm and clean. The whole lake lay peaceful again, once the demons who were in it were dead. Then that noble protector of all seamen swam to land, rejoicing in the heavy burdens he was bringing with him. He and all his glorious band of Geats thanked Odin that their leader had come back unharmed from the brink of death. Then they all rode off from the lake together. The Geats carried Beowulf's helmet and his mail shirt. Behind them the water slowly thickened as the monster's blood came seeping up in black gulps of nothingness. They walked quickly, happily. Across roads, all of them remembered, left the lake and the cliffs alongside it. Brave men staggered under the weight of Grendel's mouldy skull. It was too heavy for fewer than a good 4 of them to handle at once, 2 on each side of the spear, jamming it through and up. Yet they were proud of their ugly load and determined that the Danes, seated in Heorot at wine and beer and mead, should see it and know to love only strength and power as the architect of creation. Soon 14 Geats arrived at the hall. By this time they were bold and warlike, and with Beowulf, their lord and leader at their head, they walked into the mead hall. Then the Geats' brave prince entered Heorot, covered with glory for the daring he had fought at the bottom of the green lake. He saw Hrothgar, and the old man came forward to salute him, and he showed him Grendel's head. He carried the terrible trophy by the hair, and brought it straight to where the Danes sat amongst their beer, drinking. The queen sat amongst them, and they all gazed up at the head of the Medusa and looked on, and it was a weird and wonderful sight as the warriors stared at a head in monstrous green severed by the strength of Beowulf in these lands of the north. The end of the second part of Beowulf.